know is not to get into a battle with people I can't, who are not my size in many ways of the senses of the word. And so I'm going to stay strictly away from the agenda that Bill set out. This is not going to be a fight about for and against randomized controlled trials. What I'm going to try to do is sort of talk about how a kind of an agenda of learning from randomized controlled trials. And basically the starting point of that agenda is the thought that probably the one single best thing about randomized controlled trials, I would say, is that they can be tailored to the question. So most forms of program evaluation, you have to look at what's happening in the world and say that works or that doesn't work. The nice thing about randomized controlled trials is you pick your program, you design it, so you decide what question you're going to answer. The advantage of that is that you can have, that allows you to tailor the learning agenda to your particular form of thinking. So if you have a set of hypotheses, you can design a set of experiments that will sort of cater to that particular set of hypotheses. And then you can go back and take the answers from what you've learned, start off, usually you learn that you didn't know anything when you started, and then you start afresh. And what I will tell you a little bit is my own intellectual process of going through that. So in some ways discovering things that I didn't expect to discover. But I think in some ways what I would say is the great, advantage of randomized controlled trials has been that it has sort of forced me to confront a set of facts and empirical claims that I could have very well avoided confronting. If I only had access to other forms of data, I could have always said, well, we can never tell. And right now, unfortunately, I think the one thing that randomized controlled trial has done for me is remove that excuse. What I'll try to show to you is a process by which you sort of get beyond the standard hypothesis that you had and have to confront some possible, maybe slightly frightening open set of questions that eventually emerge because you sort of have tried all the things you thought you'll try and they didn't quite work out. So that's the sense in which I think it's both exciting and challenging to live in this world of randomized controlled trials. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk only about one thing, which is microcredit. And I'm going to, that's an excellent place to look at how this particular learning agenda has been carried out. There's lots of interesting work here. And hopefully it'll provide both a little bit of useful content and sort of a flavor of how this kind of learning process can be carried out and where it can take us. Okay, so let me start with a paper we did on, it was an impact evaluation of microfinance. Microfinance is, you probably all know, it's small loans given to poor people. They're supposed to be 150 million borrowers in the world, so it's certainly a small loans, but big program. This was an impact evaluation. It was a randomized controlled trial done in India. It's a very, very conventional microcredit program. There's group liability, so all the borrowers are responsible for each other's loans. The starting loan was about $250. They had basically weekly repayment, and the interest rate was about 24% per year, which sounds high to you, and rightly, but it's low by the standards of interest rates that poor people often pay. This was a randomized controlled trial carried out in the city of Hyderabad, which is a large Indian city in the south. It was 52 neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, were chosen for treatment, and in those 52 neighborhoods, microcredit was offered by Spandana. That increased, not hugely increased, but had a substantial increase in the access to credit that happened. The reason why the increase wasn't huge is, of course, other people can offer credit, but Spanda is a very big organization, so it did have an effect. Now, when you look at what that did, so that's just to set up, one thing that it did do, and these numbers are, so is that the blue is always going to be in these figures what happened when you didn't offer microcredit, and the yellow when you did. Where you offered microcredit, you got about, I would say, 30% more new businesses. So that's not nothing. I mean, that's a 30% more new businesses is, there's a lot, actually a fair number of new businesses that get set up. 5% of the households set up new businesses. 5% is not a small number because only about 20% of the households actually take a loan. So, 5% is a decent fraction of those households. And then about 7% set them up when you give them the loan. So that's the sort of the good news. Now, here's what was striking. And maybe the first place where I think even, maybe I was slightly, even I would say, one supposed to be unbiased, but I think I was slightly disappointed. So there's no effect on this thing called PCE, which is just per capita expenditure. That's sort of a measure of your consumption. How well are you doing? Had zero impact on that. People bought a few more durables, but mostly like things like televisions, and they cut back on some other forms of consumption, so it added up to about the same thing. The thing that's to be noted in this figure is that there was a significant increase in the amount of business durables that were purchased by these businesses, but that significant increase, this is an increase of 5 rupees. 5 rupees is 20 cents. Now 20 cents per head per month, but still 20 cents. So this is not, they're not buying lathe machines or cars. They're spending 20 cents more to buy machines. And so what kinds of machines are they buying? This is a thought to keep in your mind. They're buying maybe a few more, maybe a storage tank for rice, or they're buying a set of plastic bottles to keep their biscuits in the shop. But they're not buying they're not buying anything particularly significant. Compare that with the increase in the amount of spending on televisions. People just spend a lot more on televisions than on business assets, if you like. So that's a sort of a fact to keep in mind. This is and it's something that we'll come back to because it sort of will help us understand what's going on. You don't see, what's very striking is this fact, which you will keep coming back to, is that you don't see a huge effort to go out and start large businesses, even to the extent of the loan. Remember, the loan was $250. We're talking 20 cents here. Maybe 20 cents or a family of 5, so $1 per month, so that's $12 per year. But that's still a tiny bit of $250. A very small amount of the loan goes into buying business assets. So this is a pattern people have found in a number of places, different people have found. So there's a paper on Morocco where there's another microcredit organization offers loans, same pattern, no effect. Businesses do get created, but the businesses don't seem to generate any more earnings. The businesses are small, they don't generate any more earnings. You find exactly the same thing, strikingly, from a project that Orazio Atanasio and Costas Megir did in Mongolia, where they find exactly the same pattern. People start businesses, but the businesses are tiny, and incomes or earnings or any measure of kind of well-being doesn't seem to be affected by it. One possible hypothesis is this horizon is too short. You're just looking too soon after you give the money. Well, we looked 18 months after, but then we went back and looked 3 years after. You find exactly the same pattern. No effect really on any possible measure of well-being. Now, what that reason why that's a bit puzzling is that there's another set of facts, which I have been one of the people who've been sort of, this is why I say it's a bit of a disappointing process for me, because I've been pushing these facts for a while, and these facts are of the kind that the marginal returns, so how how much money do you make if you invest one more dollar into these businesses? And those returns tend to be very high for these tiny businesses. So that sort of makes why, so these guys, remember what they did. They took the loan, but they didn't invest in businesses. The businesses didn't grow, they didn't make a lot of money. Nevertheless, if you did invest the money, you do get big returns. How do we know that? Well, there's many different ways to know that, and I'm short of time, but there's a set of randomized controlled trials. One very nice one is just giving cash. In Sri Lanka and Mexico, they did an experiment where they gave about $250 of cash to business owners, gave them, not a loan, gift. And when you do that, you do see increases in revenues of the order of 5 to 7% per month. So returns of 5 to 7 per month, that's 60% per year. So if you invested $100, you get $60 back. So those are big returns. So why aren't these people investing? That's sort of to frame the puzzle, why is it that we do see evidence of high returns in many different forms, we don't see people actually taking advantage of them. So I think now, what are the basic answers? Well, one set of answers have to do with the inherent limits of micro enterprises. Maybe just these businesses cannot grow. Somehow there's something about the nature of these businesses. Maybe it's something about the people who are running them. Maybe it's something to do with microcredit. Remember, when I said the returns are high, those were returns from getting cash. The returns from giving microcredit, it's credit, it's not cash. You have to repay it. That might be very different, and I'll come to that. That's one issue people have looked at. And the other is what I'll eventually come back and talk to, what I'm going to call other behavioral issues. Let me come back to that later. So one way to think about it is that the fact that when I invest an extra dollar, I get 60 cents back, doesn't mean every dollar in the business is making 60 cents. That just says that the marginal dollar is making 60 cents. It could very well be that to get to the position where you get those 60 cents for every dollar invested, the first $100 you invest, you make no money on. Like you buy some little, you repair the room in your house where you're going to make your shop, you buy some plastic bottles, you fill them with stuff. It's only after you've done all that that you start making money. So maybe there's a fixed cost, and that's why the businesses have, the initial returns are sort of, even if the sort of the extra dollar invested is high, if you look at the overall how much money is the business making, it could be making very little money. This is one interesting fact that's very consistent with this is that people seem to believe this. So the business owners seem to believe this. How do we know that? I remember that Sri Lanka experiment where people were given $250, they invested, they got 60% per a year or more actually, 60 to 100% a year actually, pretty high returns. When you gave them $500, they didn't invest $500, they invested $250. They kept the other $250 to buy televisions or repair their roofs or do something else. They seem to know that their business is not going to go very far, or they seem to be acting as if they believe that. This is a picture that economists often use to represent what that production technology looks like. So, what's on the horizontal axis, for those who are used to reading graphs, is the amount of capital invested. What's on the vertical axis is the amount produced. And basically what this picture says is that, when you invest a little bit, first it goes up quite steeply, but then quickly flattens off. You don't get much more then if you want to get much bigger returns, you just have to move to a different level of investment. So you have to start, your little shop is not going to make a lot of money. You can add a few more, glossy things, but then it's going to stop making money. If you want to go to a different level of making money, you'll have to change your business strategy. You'll have to have a shop that sells new things or much more attractive things than other shops. You just have to go to a different level. So that's sort of what this picture says, and maybe this is what's going on. An alternative view, as I said, I'll come back to all of these kind of stories towards the end, is that the entrepreneurs really don't know how to run businesses. So for those entrepreneurs, maybe it's the lower of these curves, the one that kind of flattens off low is the only one that's relevant, because they're just not skilled. They just don't have in them to run these big businesses. And that idea is certainly around, and you see some evidence of that in the fact that they don't seem to be in high-skilled businesses. If you look at all the micro-enterprise people, they seem to be in businesses where the skill is fairly minimal, and you see enormous crowding. So, you see like a grocery store that's run with microcredit money every 200 meters. And that's a sign of the fact that they just don't have in them to diversify. So that's a thought that a lot of people have thought about. And there's a number of interesting RCTs which then takes that, if that's true, then maybe what we need to do is teach them stuff. If you teach them stuff, we give them business training, they'll do just much better. And we see some evidence that for example, they don't know how to do accounting, they don't know how to do inventory management. There's all kinds of like descriptive evidence which is very useful and suggestive. So there's a bunch of RCTs which actually look at that. And when they look at that, what they find is that at best you could say that you have small gains if you make the training really mundane. If you taught people not accounting, but just keep your business earnings and your household expenditures separate. Don't, keep those two things in different ledgers. So when you spend money for the business, account it one place. When you spend it for the household, keep it a different place. Something very, very obvious and elementary seems to have some effect on their business performance, but almost no effects in general. Very, very small effects, very disappointing. This is very disappointing. Now, what's striking is that at the same time, there's a set of other studies which find quite the opposite. They look at slightly bigger businesses, not big businesses, but just not mini businesses, not businesses with $250 worth of capital, businesses which have $10,000 worth of capital. When they look at those businesses, if you invest in a business like that, if you give them free business training, so all of these are basically send consultants in to teach them new ideas of products, new technologies, new ways to do your business. When you do that, you get very high returns, 60, 70, 80% investment returns on your investment. So very high returns on your investment when you actually provide this information. So what's going on? Why are the tiny businesses getting no benefits, but the slightly bigger businesses are getting large benefits? So I think, again, you might think that there's a bunch of hypotheses this throws up. One is that it's scale. The problem is scale. Training is expensive. So when you actually give people so high-quality training, which is telling them what technology to use, in Ghana, there was a nice study which did that spent about $1,100 per firm. Now, if your capital is $250, who's going to pay $1,100 to train you? So the kind of training that those people get is worth only $50 because their capital is so small. It's just never going to be viable to give them training worth $1,100. So basically, one possibility is that once you have tiny businesses, paying the trainer isn't ever going to be economically viable, so you'll never be able to sort of cross that hump. You'll just be stuck there. The alternative is that maybe training only works if there's something to learn. If you're running a shop, there's not much to learn maybe. There's no technology to learn about. So, the Ghana study shows that where you get gains when there's a new technology and you find out about it, you get it, your profits go up. But when you're running a tiny grocery store, what's the technology that's going to help you? Maybe this is not much to learn. So either way, one possibility is that just these micro enterprises are just too small to benefit. Second hypothesis is that these people are maybe they can't learn. Maybe they are just not educated enough. The basic education is too weak, something like that. A third one is that maybe they don't care about this. Maybe they think you're wasting their time. They don't actually think what you're trying to teach them is worth learning. That's when they're not paying attention because they have some other view of what's worth getting, and they just don't think what you're offering them is useful. So those are three possibilities. Again, I'll come back to these. Here's a fact to take with you. These are like places where, so what percent of, this is just a graph which shows where we have data, what percent of businesses have some machine, and machines here include a hand scale, for example. So, something like 50% of the businesses don't have any machines, and the others have things like one scale, one drum to carry the beans home or something. That's the kind of machines they have. So, so that's another possibility. Now, there's a whole other set of arguments which have to do with the fact that maybe this is not to do with the production technology. It has something to do with the fact that microfinance has particular features. So two things about microfinance are relevant. One is that this group liability, group liability means that if I were to default and if Angus were in my group, he'll have to pay for me, or he'll be punished for my not paying. And therefore, what would that do? Well, one thing that could do is make Angus quite unhappy about the possibility that I'm going to default on him, and knowing that I'm scared of him, he's going to insist that I don't do anything that has any risk in it. So he's going to make me do the safest possible thing. Many, many years ago, we wrote a paper, theoretical paper, making this argument before microcredit was really popular, but it's an argument that certainly needs thinking about. Now, on the other hand, the reason why group liability is favored is the idea that, well, again, precisely the same thing. Angus doesn't like me defaulting on him, so he's going to be watching over me, and if he's watching over me, I'm not going to dare to misbehave. So I'm going to behave myself, and the loan will get repaid. Now, question is that true? And surprisingly, the evidence on that is not very strong at all. So there's a paper by Carlin and Ginet where they look at what happens if people who had individual liability loans were given group liability loans were just said, okay, don't have to worry about your group, you just got your loan on your own. What happens to the default? Default doesn't change. On the other hand, maybe it's the case that there's some small evidence suggests that if you do that before they choose into the group, so that maybe when they selected into the group already, they were prepared to behave themselves. That's why they had joined the group, so they behaved themselves. When you do it beforehand, you do seem to see some effects, again, not huge. And we don't know what it does to risk-taking or returns. So maybe there is some benefit in terms of repayment, and maybe that's just benefit to the microfinance organization, not to the borrower. And it's not clear, what it does to returns. Does it really reduce risk-taking? Now, where you do see evidence, nice evidence, is there's a nice paper by Erica Field, Rohini Pandey, and a couple of others, where they look at the effect of another feature of microcredit, which is that you have weekly repayment. You take a loan today, next week you will start repaying. Now, that's not easy, right? You think of your business. You start a new business, you have to start making money by next week. How many people can do that? So basically what happens is that you start businesses which are very, very low risk, something you know exactly how to do. You don't explore, you don't learn, you don't try to find something new. And they find that when you extend the period of repayment to a month, from a week to a month, you do see a significant increase in the amount of exploration people do. People start doing new things, they do more original things, they make more money. So there's some evidence that maybe it's just the nature of microcredit that's driving this sort of inability of these people to do something new. Now, here's what so now I'm running out of time. So you might ask me, which is the right answer? I had one set of answers which have to do with maybe the production technology just makes microcredit unexciting. It's just there's not much space to grow. Another one is that it's, so one is production technology means there's just not much to grow. The other is that microcredit means it doesn't let people grow. Which of that's right? Well, I think the answer is neither can be the whole answer. And the reason is that there's something else that's very puzzling. Remember, I said that these people are making 60 to 100% returns on their investment. Well, when you're making 60 to 100% returns, the easy thing to do is to just cut back a little bit on your current consumption and invest in your business. That's the sort of like what the standard economics would say, is that people should just grow themselves out of poverty. Why? Because they have very high returns on their investment. They should not be worried about whether they get credit or not. They have this wonderful opportunity to save. They have a business which generates 60% or 80% returns. You just put an extra dollar in, you get some money back. And if you think of what that means in cumulative terms, it's very easy to grow out of this money. And that's sort of a puzzle, because these people seem to be sort of sitting on a gold mine. Why are they borrowing? Why aren't they just saving money? So why is it that when I offer people loans, they benefit from something that they could have just done as well on their own? We did a little calculation that's in Poor Economics. And as we looked at the shop, and we looked at how much money would you take if you were for this household to double the inventory in the shop? And the answer was 2.5% of their annual spending. So they could double their inventory by just cutting back 2.5%. Now, for those kinds of families, the average spending on cigarettes, tea, and sugar is 7%. So, 2.5% is nothing. Why aren't they growing their businesses? So that's a sort of sitting inside all of these stories. All the stories are about some external constraints, but they seem to be doing something that they could do entirely internally. They have this 60%, 80% return. Maybe it's not going to go very far, but they could go a little bit. Suddenly, they could get a little bit richer by investing. Why aren't they getting a little bit richer? So I think one possible answer to this, and this is where I think we are right now, is that basically this is the economic model of behavior is psychologically wrong. And what's importantly wrong about it is that the economic model says, if I can make 80 cents by investing $1, I should do it. Why? Because it increases my earnings. But psychologically, 80 cents is nothing. I still remain very poor. It doesn't change my status as a poor person. And maybe for all those options, maybe the marginal return is the wrong measure of how attractive this is. Maybe it's just the case that, what you care about is the fact that you can change your life. If you can't really change your life at all, then the fact that you can make few cents more money is just not going to make you very interested. So this is consistent with a number of facts. One is that the businesses of the poor just don't make any money. If you measure the labor that people put into it at market wages, then these businesses actually lose money. So these businesses, when you tell them, look, you should be all excited about growing your business, they say, well, I don't want to be in that business. And you see that very clearly. A very nice fact is that, if you look at the very poor, one thing that is very clear about them is that many of them run businesses. Like a quarter or half of them, if I had time, you could look at this picture, these numbers, the numbers are the fraction of people who have non-agricultural businesses, and in every country, that's a number that's over 40% pretty much. So these are very, very high proportions of population-run businesses. Now, if you ask the same people, what job do you want for your children? And they consistently, and in different countries, say the same thing. We want them to have a government job. We want them to have a salaried job. 80% say they want to have a government job. Another 20% say we want to have a salaried job. We don't want our children to be running businesses. So they are running businesses, but they hate it. And that's sort of just psychologically, I think that's maybe most powerful descriptive evidence that there is something in this story about their, sort of thinking of the business as this engine of growth for them is the wrong way to think about it, because they don't think that they can get very much further from where they are by running this business. Yes, they could get a little bit richer, but a little bit richer is not exciting. It's just the same life, really. So for them, basically the fact that this whole thing is self-limiting, the fact that it doesn't go very far, because the fact that that curve I drew was flattening off quickly is a discouragement. So they don't see this as really an exciting opportunity. Why are they there? Because they have nothing else to do. They don't find jobs, so they start businesses. You ask people why are they in a business, they'll tell you because I couldn't find a job. So they're there for want of better. That's consistent with many other things. For example, the fact that savings accounts, when people give savings accounts, that does help business productivity. Why does it help business productivity? You might think that, if they need to save, it's not the case that, if you want to save and you're poor and you have a business, you could save in your business. But the main point is that these people actually, what happens is when they have any problems or they need to spend money, they always take the money out of the business. That's why not having a savings account means that they run out of money very quickly. So this kind of thing would happen only because they basically don't care very much about their business. They don't believe in it very much. Yeah. So I'm going to conclude. So what I want you to see is we've come some distance through this process. We started by thinking that, this microfinance and this promise that is going to let a billion businesses grow all over the world. And somehow we've come to the conclusion that that's not quite working. And I think what's helpful is that through this process, we've got to narrow down a set of new hypotheses that's going to help us understand what's going on. So for some examples are, what's the effect of, if we gave them $50,000 loans rather than $250 loans, would it really change? Would that really change people's attitudes? Would they behave in very different ways? Would it be the case that if we found the right kinds of people, the ambitious among the poor, they behave very differently for a very small loan? How would we find those ambitious people? How would we find the skilled people? Imagine I went to these tiny firms and I offered them this expensive consulting just for an experiment. Just see what happens. Would that really change these businesses? Or would those people not be able to absorb those skills because they don't have the underlying education to absorb it? Would it matter? Would they pay attention to, if you gave them expensive consulting but you didn't give them a loan, would they pay any attention? Will they say, it's all waste because I'm not going to ever be able to grow my business big enough to make this interesting? Or will they be interested? How big would a big loan size make them more interested in the consulting? Does group liability reduce risk taking? There's a sense in which if you go through what I've tried to do, and this is sort of where I'm going to end, is to lay out this process by which you start from one set of ideas about how the world works and move to a different set of ideas. What I tried to say in closing is this idea, I want to leave you with the idea that maybe what we now need to do is psychologically reposition the way we think about these businesses, that as long as these businesses are not going to make people's lives any different, they're going to always treat them as something they have to do just because they have no choice, and they're never going to psychologically invest in them. Maybe that's where we're going to, where it fails. We need experiments like some of the ones I suggest, which will help us test those hypotheses. So that's sort of that's sort of a description of a journey that I myself have gone through, and which I think would not have been possible without the RCTs we have done, and me and mostly other people have done. Thank you very much.